Hello, welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions. I'm Katia. Citizens for Global Solutions in Minnesota is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Every month, we host one of our online projects. Today, we are hosting the Human Rights Forum, where we will discuss the Palestine in Israeli school books. Our events are free and open to anyone. If you want to learn more about CGS Minnesota work, please visit our website, www.globalsolutionsmn.org, and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak with us, we are honored to host our guest speaker, Professor Nurit Peled-Elhanan. Professor Nurit Peled is an Israeli philologist, professor of language and education at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, translator and activist. She's also co-laureate of the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought awarded by the European Parliament. Her book, Palestine in Israeli School Books, Ideology and Propaganda in Education, was released in the UK in April 2012, and it was translated in several languages. Professor Nurit analyzes the presentation of images, maps, layouts, and use of language in history, geography, and civic studies, textbooks, and reviews how the Israeli books might be seen to marginalize Palestinians, legitimize Israeli military action, and reinforce Jewish Israeli territorial identity. With you, Professor Nurit Peled. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me. I'll share my PowerPoint and I'll speak with it. How come I don't see anything? Wait. Share screen. I don't know what this is, but I lost it. Wait, just a minute, okay?
No problem.
Wait. It is here. You see it?
Not yet.
You don't?
No.
Wow. I see it. Just a minute. Desktop. Okay. Wait. Something's wrong with the... Okay, now you see?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So I called it something else, Semiotics of Othering in Israeli School Books. My talk will be based on this book, which you mentioned, Palestine in Israeli School Books, and also on this book that was published this year and won the Publisher's Prize in America. And involves also Holocaust education and its relation to othering. Now, before we start, let us remember that, I keep seeing these people who want to be admitted. Do you hear me? I don't hear you.
Yes, I can take care of that. Don't worry.
All right. So I said before starting, let us remember who pays the price for bad education, maleducación. Okay. Of course, you cannot tell who is who and which is which, but they are the victims. Now, my study is a social semiotic study. I will explain in a minute what it is. As you see, it's not a pure theory. It is always immersed in other fields and other disciplines, depends on what you want to study. So once you have your question, you use whatever is available in order to support your analysis. Therefore, it is an interdisciplinary and absolutely essential feature for social semiotic analysis. What I used was critical discourse analysis, multimodal analysis, racism and post-colonial studies, sociology, history, collective memory, geography, literature, studies of photography, and of course, Holocaust studies. Now, do you see the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the questions are always social, but the analysis is semiotic. So we ask a social question and we try to answer it through a semiotic analysis, or the other way around. We see a semiotic sign and we try to infer what is the social message behind it. All right. I'll give you one example. For example, this picture, which shows a flooded street in a poor neighborhood, and can be any poor neighborhood anywhere in the world, is defined in the caption as the Palestinian problem. Okay, this is what it says. Can you read?
Yes.
Yeah, you can read. All right, Palestinian problem has ripened in the poverty, inactivity, and frustration that were the lot of the refugees in their miserable camps. This is the caption. Okay. And then the main text says, although Israel came victorious out of the survival war that was forced upon her, the Palestinian problem would poison for more than a generation the relationships of Israel with the Arab world and with the international community. Now that may explain why we see this picture. Okay, stagnant water can really poison you or whatever. Okay, so we see the picture and we say, how come they thought this picture is apt to represent the Palestinian problem? There's nothing Palestinian about it. Okay, but when we read the text, we can have some idea. Not always, not always. So my social question was a paraphrase on Frantz Fanon question, how do the oppressors behave? I asked, how do the oppressors educate their children? How do you educate children to become these people? I still see that. It's all over my, okay. How do you take nice Jewish boys and girls and turn them into these people? Okay, the killers, the onlookers, some of them take picture. This one is taking picture, you see. And complete indifference. This girl is 11 years old. They said she had a knife, a kitchen knife in her pocket. But of course, this is not a reason to kill her, especially when you're so protected. So how do you do that? And of course, today with Gaza, we have to ask the same question. And the semiotic question was, how do school books depict the others of Israel, those who are marginalized, oppressed, or eliminated? Now, Israel publicizes itself as a democracy, but in fact, it is a settler colonial ethnocracy, one ethnic group, Jews of European origin, dominates all other ethnic groups, both Jewish and non-Jewish. Of course, in every ethnocracy, you have some individual rights that are given to the dominated ones, but you don't have national rights given to them or others. So in Israel, we have two types of others. The first type is the Jewish others. These Jews are imported by the state for demographic reasons, and they're supposed to be molded and cultivated until they suit the ideal of a Jewish Western modern democratic state. During the process of cultivation and molding, they go through symbolic cultural elimination and inner colonialism, which means they have to give up their culture, their language, their religious customs, and they are completely dependent on the Israeli bureaucracy. The other group is the indigenous Arab Palestinians. They are not candidates for integration and assimilation because they cannot be changed. They are treated like a race. They are racialized. Okay, a race is a group of people that can never change. The Jews will always be 1, 2, 3. The Arabs will always be this and that. The blacks will always be this and that. This group goes through symbolic, cultural, and physical elimination. This is from a geography book, and it is called Jewish versus Arab Population in Israel 2000. If you see the upper part of the diagram shows Jews and others. It's written in English because it's taken from some kind of a human development publication in America. So we have Jews and others, and at the bottom we have Arabs. The Jews and others are depicted as, you know, funny people, but they have no ethnic characteristics or ethnic object signs on them. You cannot tell they're Jewish or anything. The Arabs are represented by racist icons of Alibaba, the camel, and the crouching wife. Now, the question which the book does not answer is, who are the others, Jews and others, if they are not the Arabs? And we can assume that the others are non-Jews who are not Arabs. So they deserve to be in our group. Mainly the Russians, non-Jews who came to Israel. Sorry, my phone, just a minute. So in the big waves of immigration from Soviet Union, after the Soviet Union fell, some 500,000 people came who were not Jewish. But they deserve to be with us because they're white, they're Europeans, I don't know why. And they are defined in the registry others as others. But the school book does not explain that. They just say there are others who are not Arabs, because the Arab citizens of Israel are called non-Jewish sector. Okay. Now, the purpose of school books is, why do we have school books anyway? Why do we need school books? I mean, there are so many books. Why do we need school books? So school books are a tool at the hands of the state to turn reality into a version of this reality, which means mostly to legitimate the foundational crimes of the nation. Yeah, American textbooks are no different, of course. Israeli school books are meant to legitimate the Zionist project of conquest and settlement to both Jewish and Palestinian students, because Palestinian citizens, although they study in separate schools, they learn the same curriculum about the Zionist project and the redemption of the land and so on and so forth. They don't learn anything about their own history or their own culture. All the books have some basic assumptions without which they will not be authorized by the ministry. We have many books because it's a private industry and the teachers can choose what they want. But in order to be authorized, they have to have some basic assumptions. Some of them are existential assumptions, which tell you what exists. Jewish historical rights on the land of Israel-Palestine, global anti-Semitism, and so on. And value assumptions, what is good and desirable. Jewish state, Jewish majority, Israeli control as a guarantee against another Holocaust. This is very important. Jewish majority is the highest principle of everything. I mean, it's an end to which all the means are legitimate, to keep a Jewish majority. So school books do not provide, as Beckerman says, any innovative solution to inequality in the society, but rather provide an appropriate rationalization for inequality. Okay, why are they expelled? Because we need a Jewish majority and so on. School books are not there in order to rectify anything, but they are there to legitimate what the state wants them to legitimate. For example, this is from a Civic Studies book. There is no contradiction between the fact that Israel is comprised of a civil nation of citizens and the fact that several ethno-cultural minorities live in it, but the only nation that enjoys self-determination is the Jewish one. No contradiction. This way of conveying things does not leave any room for discussion. That's the way it is. Okay, like a natural fact. There's no contradiction. Another example, there is a system of military courts which tries the Arab inhabitants of Judea and Samaria who are under the military dominion of Israel. Why are they under the military dominion of Israel? Why are they two systems of justice? This is not explained. This is given. Of course, this is what it means. Yeah, this Palestinian child was lynched and then handcuffed to his bed in the hospital. By the way, today he's 23. He's still in prison. This is him going to a military court. Children, Palestinian children, are judged in military courts. But nobody explains why it is so. So school books, as I said, create some version of reality. And one of the characteristics of this reality is the creation of what is called usable past. The usable past, again, legitimates the founding crimes of the nation. And of course, this may lead to sacrificing accuracy and objectivity. For example, timelines. If you look at Palestinian and Israeli school books, they have different timelines altogether. You can look at Korean and Japanese school books, you find the same thing. It's not that they are lying, but it's that they are creating another version of the same reality. Now I'll give you another example. This is from this school book for 4th grade. And in this school book, we have a 12-year-old speech to her guests on the occasion of her birthday. And you can think how they create this usable past. Dear guests, I thank you for coming to our beautiful settlement Ofra. Now, Ofra is one of the first illegal settlements built on Palestinian villages of Ein Yabrud and Silwad in 1977. We know it is a holy commandment to settle the land and to continue the way the pioneers in the country of the Bible, in our settlement Ofra. There are people who think we have no right to live here in Ofra because the Arabs lived here while the people of Israel was in exile. 2,000 years, the people of Israel did not live entirely in Israel, in Palestine, which is again a myth that is perpetuated and conceived as reality. The settlement in this region is justified, she says, in our opinion, by the Bible and the tradition, and is important from a security point of view. Our houses were built on state lands. State lands, of course, are the lands confiscated from the Palestinians. And we are trying to keep good relationships with our Arab neighbors. So experts will tell you that none of these things is true. Neither the Bible thing, nor the security argument, and not the term state lands, and of course, not the good relationship with the neighbors. Now, just note that she doesn't call them Palestinians, but Arabs. Palestinians are called Arabs in order to convey the idea that they are part of the big Arab nation, the Ummah, and they can leave and go and join their brothers or sisters wherever they want. We only have this one state. So this is the way the past is revised by the books. So there's no wonder that Israel has never encouraged and never had peace education or official mixing between Jewish and Palestinian students, because the main thing is wanting not to teach. We don't know anything about Palestine in the 2,000 years we weren't here. Okay, we don't know anything about the Jews who lived in other countries either. The only thing we know is that they wanted to come back. So we don't learn anything about Palestine. We don't learn anything about Jewish life in other countries. Okay, now how do you do this action of othering and exclusion and legitimate it? Because children can ask questions, So the first thing is to turn human beings into abstraction. Okay? Make human beings into abstraction. For example, calling them a problem, not showing them ever, erasing them from all maps, and so on. So the person must become an abstraction, and the overall effect of abstraction is that moral and ethical rules do not interfere where the handling of a category is concerned. Okay? If they are the enemy, then you don't need moral or ethical considerations while handling them. This is Zygmunt Bauman. Indeed, Palestinians are, when they are mentioned in the books, they are rarely mentioned in the books. Palestinians are absent from the books, from Israeli consciousness, from Israeli discourse, from Israeli reality. It is not, a wonder that, people go on living here while thousands and thousands of children are being killed in Gaza and nobody cares, because they are non-existent. Okay, when you talk about Israeli literature, you don't mention Palestinian Israeli writers. When you talk about Israeli science, you don't mention Palestinian Israeli scientists, and so on and so forth. In the books, they are defined as the refugee problem, developmental problem, demographic problem, security threat. And these problems must be solved. Okay, of course, it reminds one of the Jewish problem. So the first thing, you don't show them, as I say, you don't show them where they live. This is an aerial photograph of Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. And the caption tells you Gaza region whose inhabitants live in overcrowdedness and poverty. Why do they live in overcrowdedness and poverty? Nobody knows. But the picture doesn't show you people. Okay, they are abstracted from, it is the most crowded place in the world. And Theo van Leeuwen, who studied Dutch school books and the racist ways they show the third world in our streets, calls it the angle of the omnipotent observer placed high above the madding crowd, or the angle of the pilot who flies too high to be able to see the people on whom he's dropping the bombs. This is a kind of objective knowledge which education is still primarily concerned to reproduce. Okay, this is objective. This is the camp. We don't know what's going on in there, and we don't want to. This is one picture from the winter. All these things are not shown in school books, as they are not shown in Israeli media, of course. When you see a checkpoint, usually you don't, but in this book you do. It's what we call a flying checkpoint. One day it's there, one day it's not there. The people against whom this checkpoint was built are not there. You see the soldiers sitting, having coffee, cigarette, very nice, very pastorally. And for the students who are going to do checkpoints in a few years as soldiers, it's not so bad. All right? This is a real checkpoint, but nobody ever sees that. This is a real checkpoint at all hours of the day. And then, since you see the people, you can ask all kinds of practical and rational questions. What is the purpose of the checkpoint? How does it represent our defensive democracy? What is administrative detention? One advantage, one disadvantage, because the children will never know what it means, administrative detention, except that it's some kind of a means of our defensive democracy. This is something they never see. This is administrative detention, or this. Or this. Okay. Again, they said she had a knife. And this is 2 weeks after she was in prison. Her parents didn't know where she was. She didn't see any lawyer, social worker, relative, or anything. This is how she came out. But again, the school books will never show this. And this is another way to eliminate people from the landscape. This is the cover of a series of books called Living Together in Israel for grades 2 to 4. As you see, the people are very happy to live together in Israel, but all of them are white. So you don't see Arabs and you don't see Ethiopian Jews among them. And the best way to abstract the people is, as I said, not to show them in the maps. This is called geographic silence or toponymic silence. This is a map of Arab population, all right? And you don't have one Arab city on the map. So the impression is that they live among us, upon us, which is very frightening. The West Bank is defined as an area without data, which means there are no people there. Okay? And of course, mental maps. Mental maps are very good to justify exclusion. For example, this book, geography book, Factors that Inhibit the Development of the Arab Village. Arab villages are far from the center, the roads to them are difficult, and they have remained out of the process of change and development. They are hardly exposed to modern life, and there are difficulties to connect them to the electricity and water network. So you would think we live in Australia, yeah, where you have these remote villages. But the largest line of Israeli width is 50 kilometers. So where exactly are these very remote villages that cannot be connected to water and electricity and have remained primitive? But of course, nobody asks these questions. And mental maps work wonders. So as I said, the main thing, I mean, the obsession even with demography and and majoritarianism, the idea that we must outnumber them, controls everything. And of course, legitimate their confinement in strict boundaries. Yeah, Appadurai calls it the anxiety of incompleteness, which creates frustration and rage that drives those forms of degradation that shock us most, from Germany to Rwanda, from Kosovo to Mumbai, and of course we can add Israel. For example, this is what geography book explain about the outposts in the Galilee that are built on top of mountains overlooking Arab villages. This is a very old project called the Judaization of the Galilee. It hasn't succeeded so far. But the book tells you we must preserve the national land and protect it from illegal invasion by non-Jewish population. But this non-Jewish population are the citizens. So why is it illegal? For fear that an Arab sequence would cause the detachment of Galilee from the state of Israel. But they are part of the state of Israel. Okay? And in reality, this is what happens, really. They are not admitted to these outposts. And of course, Palestinians must accept their lot of being a minority at all cost. Okay, because their being a minority is very artificial. They are the majority. But, you know, when you build all these walls, inside the walls, they are the minority. And it's hard for them to accept it. And it's their fault anyway. When you go to war, you cannot lament your defeat. Another book, the Arabs brought it upon themselves, for they fought the Jews to perdition, and so on and so forth. Then majoritarianism legitimate military government and occupation. For example, the military government helped Jewish settlement all over the country and prevented Arab seizure of vacant lands. Again, vacant lands are the lands confiscated from them. So the military government prevented them from coming back to their homes after they were expelled. And one of the most known ways of expelling and excluding Palestinian citizens is the law of citizenship. The law says that if a citizen of Israel marries a Palestinian from the occupied territories, they cannot live together in Israel. They cannot live together in the Palestinian territories either. So you have thousands and thousands of families where one parent is illegal, which means cannot leave the house, cannot have a driving license, cannot register the children to any school. It's a huge problem. And the book says that some defend this law in the name of Israel's defensive democracy and the danger of terror attacks, of course. And some other commend the law for national reasons and the Jewish character of the state. Okay, we don't want non-Jews here. We have enough. Of course, if they're white, we want them. The Supreme Court ruled that the law is unconstitutional, but rejected the petition against it because it was an emergency law. And the Supreme Court, Barak, the one who was in The Hague now, ruled that human rights are not a recipe for national suicide. So too bad for you if you cannot live with your husband or wife, but it's for our safety. And of course, majoritarianism legitimate ethnic cleansing. From the Jewish point of view, Plan D was a great success. Plan D was the plan of ethnic cleansing of all the villages between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It strengthened the military power of the Jewish community and created a Jewish territorial sequence as a strategic asset, which is a good thing. And in order to convince the children that this is right, you must use racist discourse and assign an inferior, the colonized are assigned to an inferior evil race. You have to say they're evil. You have to say they're primitive. You have to say they're a burden. Okay, the white man's burden. And present the negative qualities as if they are in their blood. They will never change. The Arab society is traditional and objects to changes by its nature, reluctant to adopt novelties. Modernization seems dangerous to them. They are unwilling to give anything for the general good, which means they are unwilling to give more and more land. One way of racist discourse to present people is through stereotypes, of course. Yeah, you make a category of people and every individual is just a sample of this category. He's a specimen, but has no individuality, has no history, has no biography. In all the hundreds of books that we have, including books that are called the Arabs of our country, we don't have one photograph of an Arab human being like us. We have the primitive farmer, as you see here, with the oxen, what is called the Oxfam image of the poor of the third world. This, we saw him already, a racist icon. This time the caption says the Arabs refuse to live in high buildings and insist on living in land-ridden one-story houses. And if you see the vector that goes from the camel behind to the house, you can see the attitude of the camel towards the house. And this encloses the possibility of high building. The Arab is outside, but nobody in the world looks like that. So the children received this icon as representing the Palestinian citizens of the state, right? The doctors, the scientists, the teachers, the drivers, the politicians, whatever. Whenever they are mentioned, you have this caricature in this book. Or terrorists, of course. You don't have anything else. So through the stereotype, as Mahomi Baba says, colonial discourse fixes identities and denies it any chance of change. The way we saw them 100 years ago, this is the way we see them now. And of course, majoritarianism legitimates killing. For example, the escape of the Arabs following the Deir Yassin massacre solved a terrifying demographic problem. And even a moderate person such as the first President Weizmann spoke about it as a miracle. Okay. And this is another massacre, Kibbia massacre, 1953, led by Ariel Sharon. Slaughter of innocent Palestinians in their homes brought about some confidence to Jews in their homes. You see a lot of books. Restored the morale and dignity to the army and helped it become a deterrent, vigorous army whose long arm can reach the enemy deep in its own territory. Okay, the story was that A woman and 2 children were murdered in a village called Yahud, that was a Palestinian village, cleansed and re-inhabited by Jewish immigrants from Morocco. But the murderers came from a very far away village inside Jordan. So Ariel Sharon and his unit decided to kill a whole village near the border, which was more convenient for them. So they came in the night and they just slaughtered the whole village. Kibya. Now, why do they have to die? Usually, the books give you some technical explanations that we hear in Gaza too. We threw leaflets telling them to leave, okay? And they haven't left. So what can we do? The loudspeaker encouraging the inhabitants of Deir Yassin to leave the village did not work. The people did not leave the village, and that is the reason why the number of casualties among them was so great. Or the soldiers did not know the people were hiding in their homes that night. The overall claim of these reports is that positive outcome for us may condone or overlook evil done to them. This is it. Now, the Jews are presented as the eternal victims. Therefore, we must outnumber the indigenous others, dominate them, and be the most powerful state in the region, lest another Holocaust should exterminate us. So the Palestinians have been assigned the role of the potential exterminators after the Germans. Since we befriended Germany in 1953, the Arabs, and especially the Palestinians, received the role of potential exterminators. And they are Nazified, all right? They are Nazified in the school books as in the political discourse, which I believe you hear all the time from our politicians. For example, this is a teacher's guide for grade 2. The students will understand that during World War II, the Jews did not have a state. That's why they were exterminated. The establishment of the state of Israel guarantees our security and safety and so on. Now we can defend ourselves. This conflation of Nazis and Palestinians is very, very popular with politicians and school books. In a book that prepares the students for their A-level or matriculation exam, the end of high school, there is a chapter called The Formation of Holocaust Remembrance. But this chapter does not tell you anything about the Holocaust. It enumerates terrorist attacks by Palestinians and tell you that these events made Israelis identified with Holocaust victims. Okay, for example, number 2, this traumatic event exposed the weakness and vulnerability of Israelis in the face of terror and led them to adopt a different attitude towards Holocaust survivors, because Holocaust survivors and victims were very despised in Israel, were treated with contempt, total contempt. But the terrorist attacks, which are not presented as resistance to colonialism, but as anti-Semitic heinous crimes that came out of the blue. No context whatsoever. So they are Nazified, and this is what made Israelis understand the Holocaust victims and survivors, okay? Again, another one. This event also exposed the weakness and vulnerability of the Israelis against their enemies and enabled many Israelis to identify with Holocaust survivors and to be attentive to the stories and so on and so forth, because all these events reinforced the feeling of persecution. We are persecuted by these people. The same argument we heard after the 7th of October. These are Nazis. They killed Jews because they are Jews, and that's it. So Israeli school books command the students to ignore the other drama, that of the victim and their circumstances, to disregard international laws and decision, and look ahead of injustice to the favorable consequences for Israeli Jewish nation. They teach the students the discourse of power of politicians and generals and put at stake the disciplinary politics of truth. Caroline Coffin studied Australian school books, and she said it about Australian school books, but of course we can say the same about Israeli school books. And this kind of education creates what is called a lyricism, which is a racism that is produced from above and inculcated at school. Okay? It inscribed itself in practices, in discourses and representations, which are intellectual elaborations of the need to purify the social body, to preserve one's own identity from all form of mixing, interbreeding, or invasion. You know that in Israel, the most important thing is to have a Jewish state, okay? A Jewish state where we are the total overwhelming majority, to have as few as possible non-Jews. So this is what I have to say for the moment. And now we can have questions. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Professor. That's a very enlightening presentation of yours. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. So this first question, Professor, is the following. The person attended a talk at the Minnesota History Center a couple of years ago. Harvard professor Donald Yakovon shared the results of his review of nearly 3,000 school textbooks from the colonial era through the 20th century, demonstrating how mostly Northern publishers perpetuated the pernicious myth of white supremacy through the teaching of American history, how slavery, race, abolitionist, the Civil War, and Reconstruction have been taught in our schools. As you shared, US textbooks equally perpetuate prejudices and untruths. She wanted your comment.
Okay. What can I say? Yeah, I mean, this is not a particular of Israel. I mean, this is why we have school books. That's what I said at the beginning. Okay.
So I have a question, Professor. So you speak, and your teachings and your explanation about what your studies are very clear to anybody. So the question is, do you feel any pressure from your government? Do you feel afraid, or, well, you still are speaking and teaching, but do you receive any pressure to stop talking and teaching what you do teach?
Well, this government started to persecute Jewish teachers also. Until now, only Arab teachers were surveilled, monitored, interrogated, and persecuted. But today it's much more. Yeah, I don't know if you heard about Professor Nadira Shalhuv Korkevian, who was suspended from the Hebrew University for things that she said outside class. I was suspended for something I said in a closed WhatsApp group of teachers, and I was summoned to the police and so on. Finally, I resigned. But yes, today things are getting worse. But until this government, we had complete strict freedom of speech and academic freedom. As long as students did not complain, university didn't care for anything. Today it's different. Today it's different. I just gave a testimony in a trial of Meir Baruchin, who is a high school teacher, was kidnapped from his home, was beaten, tortured because of things that he writes in his Facebook. Okay, every day he publishes pictures of Palestinians, children or other people, innocent people who were killed, tortured, or so on. So suddenly, you know, that's what happens to him. He was fired. And now he sued the municipality that fired him, and I was there as an expert on teaching. But yes, today we are much more persecuted than before. I mean, I never had any problem. Of course, I don't teach history. And when I taught, you know, language and ideology, I called it in school books, the students were very attentive, and they really learned how to read these books, and there were no problems, okay, of disbelief, because when you see the things that you cannot believe or not believe, this is what it is. So, and I made my own courses. Nobody ever interfered with my courses. But today it's different. Today I don't know if they interfere in the courses, but you know, what happened to me was that I wasn't fired. I could have gone on, but they put a letter of reprimand in my file where they say that I'm suspected of being a terrorist supporter and so on and so forth. So I said, if they don't withdraw a letter, I resign, and I resigned. Yeah, but this is not the problem. I mean, this is not the problem. It's a small price to pay, as they say.
Well, it's one of the problems.
Well, you know, yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, Jack Levy.
We have another question here. So somebody wants to ask, wants to know about education, about Jewish students versus Palestinian students.
Oh, no.
Are they in separate schools? Do they ever intermingle in school or outside of school? It would be that they need to understand and know each other before they become adults?
No, there are two separate systems. The Arab system is underfunded, horrible conditions. And as I told you before, they learn the Zionist, I mean, they learn the same curriculum. They don't learn anything about their own history or culture or literature, poetry, nothing. Only the Israeli Hebrew one. There are some private schools that are bilingual, where Arab and Jewish children learn together, like my grandchildren are in such a school, and this is very nice. You have two teachers in the class all the time. One speaks in Arabic, the other in Hebrew. In all the classes, I mean, mathematics, history, sciences, everything, okay? And all the children speak the two languages, and it's a very nice project, but it's private. Okay, the state does not encourage any mixing until they are soldiers, and then they see them in the checkpoints, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but you know, all kinds of organizations that used to give lectures at schools. Today, they're not allowed to give lectures at schools, like the Parent Circle and Breaking the Silence and all these organizations, Combatants for Peace. It's very strict now. Yeah, very limited. Mm-hmm. The state doesn't want any mingling, because then, you know, it's very hard to tell 18 years old, go kill the, you know, the children of the neighbors if you know the children of the neighbors.
We have another question. Can you say more about the Ethiopian Jews and their engagement on this issue? From your perspective, the Ethiopian Jews benefit from the state of Israel?
Ethiopian Jews were brought to Israel. They are still brought. Mainly because, I mean, they tried to come to Israel for many years, but they were not allowed to. I mean, Israel didn't want Black people here. But then in 1975, the UN defined Zionism as a racist movement. And this was one of the answers, to bring Ethiopians, to let them come. They are treated horribly. They are put in camps for years, what is called absorption centers. They are completely dependent on Israeli bureaucracy. They cannot choose schools for their own children. They cannot choose work. They have to go through endless religious examinations. They have to be converted to Judaism, recircumcised, and so on. A few years ago, there was huge protest of Ethiopian people. The police is very harsh on them. I can say, like, the police is harsh on Black people in America. And the chief of police even said that. He said, well, it's the color, what can I do? In school books, they are not represented in any way except as a problem that the state has to cope with. I worked with them a lot, with children, and I wrote about racism in class from the teachers. It's very sad, and it's still going on. Yeah, a lot. Of course, some of them are strong enough to overcome everything, and the only thing they can brag about is being officers in the army or something like that. Mm-hmm. But they really are treated in a very racist way. Very racist way. Even after they leave the absorption centers, they cannot buy houses where they want. They are concentrated in slums, in affluent cities, but in slums. And it's very hard for them. Very, very hard for them. And now they are protesting, yeah, from time to time. Their percentage in youth prisons is much higher than their percentage in society, and so on. You know what racism is. Yeah. And it is state racism. It's institutional racism. And of course, they have quota for them at schools and so on and so forth.
Professor, I know that our time is up. Do we have time for one last one? Okay, so do you think there are, or there is, any country in the Middle East where you could speak against the country the way you do?
No, but what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? I mean, I don't compare myself and my country to dictatorships. I compare them to, I think that even in democracies like yours, I cannot speak the way I do. I'm sorry, okay? I know that people in the United States are being fired for less, for saying less than I do, and I think it's horrible. I think this is one of the victories of Israel, of the lobby, the Israeli lobby, and we see the results today when nobody can do anything to stop what is happening in Gaza. Nobody in the world. Not the International Court of Justice, not the European Parliament. The Americans don't want to stop it because they profit from it. And yeah, we see the results of that. People are afraid to be called anti-Semitic, although, you know, nobody ever died of being called anti-Semitic. Nobody ever died of being anti-Semitic. But so many people are dying now, right now, for being Palestinians. And so still, you know, Here, you
Yeah.
can say that for people like me, here it's better, but yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
say anything. It
Do you
doesn't say anything.
Do you think the the Israel is becoming a dictatorship?
Israel has always been a dictatorship for part of its population, okay, for at least 20% of its population. And of course, for the occupied 5 million people, it's been a dictatorship. Now it is, the whole, what they call the revolution, the judicial revolution was meant to turn Israel into a dictatorship. And there was a lot of protest against it until the war. And now they're starting again. Yes, they're trying to pass all kinds of laws that will give all the authority to the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Professor, it's been wonderful. It's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And on behalf of CGS, I want to thank you all for attending this event. If you want to watch again, the recording of this discussion can be found on our website and on our YouTube channel. I'm sorry if we didn't have time to bring all the questions to our wonderful speaker. CGS hosts events every month. Next event is in April, Human Rights Forum about information communication technology in the humanitarian and development sector. And our guest speaker is Dua Shalan from Jordan, who will take a closer look on how the information communication has an impact on the humanitarian sector. The date is April 23, and if you need more information, please go to our website. Thank you so much, Professor Nurit Peled, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. We wish you all the best, and we do all wish this war ends soon. And it's your last words.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And don't be afraid.
I'm sorry.
I said, don't be afraid.
Okay. Thank you.